Hey, just kidding. Hey, everybody. How's it going? That was a joke. I hope you got that. Welcome to the VS Code live stream. If you joined us last week, it was interesting because everything went wrong and we sputtered and crashed in a burning ball of flames and we had to cancel the stream. And so we're back. But listen, we fired everybody that was involved with that. I'm on probation now. It's probably my last stream, so we got to get this one right. But thank you for being with us. Today, we are going to be doing debugging, web debugging in VS Code with a couple engineers here at Microsoft. Before we get started, a couple notes. First of all, we're streaming weekly now. We stream Thursdays. Sometimes we have release parties. Sometimes we have guests on. Sometimes we bring in folks from Microsoft to give in-depth talks like we're doing today. So you want to check that out. There's an AKA there for checking out our live streams. And occasionally we crash and burn, and you're going to want to be there for that because we deleted the video. You can't go back and watch it. It was a giant cluster, and now you can't see it, but you would have if you had been following the streams. So you're going to want to do that. Also on our YouTube channel, go ahead and like and subscribe there. We'd love to see you there. Comments on our videos. Making a lot of shorts these days. Anybody doing shorts out there? They kind of get forced into your YouTube app. You don't have a choice. You have to watch the shorts. And we're also on TikTok. These short videos seem to be really good for doing VS Code tips. So a great place for us to do those. We're doing them there, which you can check out down in the link. Okay, all of that stuff aside, we're still live. This is 1,000 times better than was last week. So please join me in welcoming Connor and Brandon to the stream. Hey, fellas. Connor is a software engineer at Microsoft, and so is Brandon. Connor's on the VS Code team, and Brandon, are you on the Edge team?
Yes, Edge DevTools team.
Oh, all right. Did I go by too fast? Do we want to put locations up again? Let's do it slowly. Connor is over here.
Yes.
And Brandon, there we go. Perfect. Nailed it. All right. What are we going to be talking about, and what are you going to show us today?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm talking about the debugger to VS Code, which is pretty new. And I'll try and do it well so that we can get you off probation and back into the good graces of Satya. So yeah. So like last July, we released a new debugger for VS Code. And with this like debugger came like a bunch of new features, including the notion of multi-target debugging, which means we can debug things like service workers, web workers, and Node.js worker threads, as well as a performance and an increased focus on making it easier to like onboard or for like new users who never use debugging to actually get debugging and debug using VS Code. And so also we have lots of cool notifications, such as with the Edge DevTools, which Brandon will be showing later on today. Yeah, so first off, I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. So like here we have it looks like a pretty simple Express app. So it's serving files from like this directory, and also has this API endpoint that looks like spell checking. And so we can look at it. We can see that it uses this like array of workers and uses the Node.js worker threads. And so worker threads are really useful if you have expensive computation that you don't want to do on the main thread, because even though like I/O inside of Node.js is asynchronous, as you probably know, the actual like running JavaScript code is not. So you can only run like one JavaScript statement at a time. So if you have really expensive things like doing spell checking, you want to do that on a worker thread or have multiple threads doing it. So yeah, we create one of those worker threads, then we send a message to it. Well, we take one off, we send a message to it, and then we wait till it responds, and then we get that back in the API response. And so first of all, let's like I just set a breakpoint here and just walk through it to make sure that our assumptions are correct. So if I want to debug this, there's a few ways to actually do that. So like traditionally, you probably created a launch.json file that would like let you configure how you wanted to launch a program, but it's pretty hard to figure out how to do that if you're new to VS Code. And there are a few easier ways that you can do it now. So first off, if you've been using or if you've been writing JavaScript code in VS Code for a while, you've probably noticed the debug code lens here.
Hey, Connor, real quick, can you just bump that font size up maybe one step?
Sure. I will actually do this so I don't have to zoom in anymore.
Oh, beautiful.
There we go. Is that better?
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so like you've probably seen the debug code lens here. then this basically lets you debug any of your Node.js scripts with one click. So if I click on this, you'll see that we launched in debug mode. In debug mode here, my toolbar color changed to indicate that we're now debugging. And if I had multiple scripts here, then you would have gotten like a quick pick asking which one you want to actually debug. And so that's cool. The other way to do things is to use the debug terminal. And this debug terminal, you might have heard us refer to it as the magic terminal, where all Node.js programs that you run in there are going to be debugged. So if I go over here, I can create that by hitting the little drop down next to the plus button, and then selecting the JavaScript debug terminal. And now, like any Node.js program I run, so even if I just run node and open the REPL, then that will be debugged. So if I type node, and now I'm in the REPL, if I even type just like debugger, then you'll see that we actually pause there, and you can run any code here and it'll be debugged. And we can also, of course, just run node index.js to actually run our program right there. I'll move this guy out of the way. And so now you see that this a breakpoint is bound, which means that when we actually call this endpoint, it'll be hit. So to call it, I'm going to use some of VS Code's new native notebooks as well. So we have this RESTbook extension, which basically lets you have a notebook that contains HTTP calls. In this case, we're making a post request to localhost, and then we're including the body with the word performance, which is misspelled. And if I go ahead and execute that, then we'll hit the breakpoint right there. And then we can step through it, and yep, we're creating a new worker thread. We're popping it off. We're sending a message there, and then if I put a breakpoint there, then we're sending back, looks like a JSON snippet containing correct is false, and then word is the correct word right there. So now, if I want to actually see what's happening in the worker thread, I don't really have to do anything extra. So looks like this is pulling in worker.js. So I can just go in there, and then just like any other program or any other part of my program, I can set a breakpoint right here. And then if we run this again, then you see that we're just paused. And you can see actually in the call stack view here that we're paused not in the main process here, but a worker thread. And we're just calling it worker1 right now. So we can step through this. We can step into our spell check function, and then looks like it's, yeah. So it looks like this is going through a list of like all English words, and then it's looking at the edit distance between them and getting the most similar words. So the edit distance is just a number that indicates the number of kind of mutations or changes that you have to make to a certain string to get to another string. So if you have like one deletion or one insertion, that's like one distance unit away from the original string. So we just go through every single word that we know about, and then we get the most similar word and return it. And so that's cool, but this is actually kind of slow. Like you see that it takes like a second or so to actually do that. So if I wanted to figure out why it's slow, I can use our new performance tooling. So again, there's a few ways to actually do that. So you can hit the record button here to actually take a profile, or you can use the take performance profile command right there. And I'm actually going to restart this program just so that I can have a single worker real quick. So if I make this or make a request, now we have one worker. And so now I can go ahead and take a performance profile. I use the command here. It's going to ask me which process I want to take a profile of. Let's choose the worker. Let's take a CPU profile. And now we can choose when we want to stop it. We can stop it. We can run it until we want to stop it, or we can run it for a specific duration or until we hit a breakpoint. I'll just do it until we stop it, and then make a few requests. So I'm going to make 1, 2, 3 requests, and then you can stop it just by hitting that big little record button up there. And now this will open the table view that kind of shows like performance of every function that was called. And so you have two columns here. You have the stop time, which is the amount of time that was spent in this single function, as well as the total time, which is the time spent in this function or any other function that it called. It's kind of nice. Like you can like look through these entries, and then if you click on the locations here, then like it'll bring you to use course, and then it'll also annotate all your functions with the timing information. So you can see we spent 40 milliseconds in this function itself, and then 4 seconds or so. Mostly it looks like calling into get edit distance. So this is nice, but there's actually a better way to actually view what's happening, and that's through the flame graph. And so to get at that, you can hit the little flame icon right here. And then if you don't have the extension installed, it's actually a separate extension. But if you don't have it installed, then it'll have you install it right there. And now I can open the profile again. Now, if I hit the flame icon here, it'll open the flame graph view. And this is a chronological view showing, like, at every moment in the program, this is the function that was running. And so we can, like, zoom in here. We can see that, like at around 5 seconds or so, it was calling into the edit distance function there, which is not surprising. Also, something very useful in flame chart is that if you have servers, then most often what happens is that a single call isn't that slow. But then when you have like hundreds of calls that are like each individually taking a lot of time, or all together taking a lot of time, and then it's hard to like see at like each individual call stack, what's it's hard to get a sense of like what's taking time if you just look at the chronological view. So you can use what's called the left heavy view, and if you click this button, then what happens is that it groups all the same call stacks together. So instead of showing like 1,000 different calls, it'll show only the unique stacks, and then like you can see that, yeah, like as we thought in this case, basically all the time is spent in this little spell check function here. And it's very easy to see instead of having to look at individual, often very small and very tall call stacks. Yeah, and so anyway, so it looks like time's being spent in there. So let's actually try and like go into this edit distance function and see what's happening inside of there. So I'll set a breakpoint again and then make another request. And now we're paused there and let's step in here. Yeah, so it looks like this is a minified program. It's like all on one line, but the new debugger actually recognized that and was able to say, hey, we can actually deminify it for you. And so let's accept its offer there. In this case, basically we like pre-printed this file instead of showing a single line. It just formatted it better so that we can step through it more easily. Just like we would like a better program. You can also set breakpoints online, and so on and so forth. Looks like we didn't hit that breakpoint in that case, but yeah, and that's like a whole lot easier than having to like step through a single line, which is very awkward to do. So yeah, it looks like that was like mostly like a lot of math. So this is probably pretty efficient. Like I'm probably not smart enough to actually figure out what's going wrong here, or if there's a way to make it faster. So it looks like probably like the solution if you wanted to fix this is to just like use a better data structure instead of having to go through every word. Maybe we can use a tree or something. But yes, and so I think that pretty much covers like what's happening actually in my program. One more thing that I wanted to mention that that you get with the flame chart extension is that you get this real-time performance view here, and this is it just shows you basically the current resource usage of your program. So if I select the worker and then make a few calls, you see that we actually have a CPU usage spike there as it's trying to basically spending a whole CPU core just doing the spell checking work. This is like very useful, just kind of to have a gauge of like how long, how many or how much resources like your program is taking. If I'm used to like just having this open and seeing it takes like 70 megabytes of RAM, and I see all of a sudden I made a change and it's taking like 500 megabytes or something, then I can know that I probably just made a change that might have introduced a leak or something just very inefficient. And so like this is like very useful just to see that, and also the same a record button is present inside the performance view here as well, so you can see that very easily and take a performance profile from that same view. Yeah, and so that pretty much covers this. So now it seems like the API is okay at least, and so let's actually try debugging the front end. And so once again, there's a few ways to actually like open up Chrome or like open up a browser, in this case Edge, to debug it. Again, traditionally you would have had to use a launch config and like configure like your web root and so on and so forth. But today there's actually two simpler ways to do that today. And so first of all is that if you are using the debug terminal, then if you hover on links here, you might notice instead of having the tooltip to just open a URL, it's tooltip to debug the URL. So what happens is that all links inside the debug terminal, if you click on them, will automatically be debugged. So if I click on this, then it'll open a browser in debug mode. And if I open my index.html file, if I set a breakpoint there, you'll see that it is verified. Something you have to note, and one common confusion is that if you just have the debug terminal open and you open a browser just like in a different URL, just like normally, then it won't be debugged, because the debug terminal only debugs Node.js programs. So you have to actually open a browser in debug mode to debug like your website. And so this is one option. Another option is using the debug open link command. And this, like similarly to the link here, lets you put in any URL. So in this case, we can put in localhost 80, and then if we hit that, then it'll be debugged. And this command also offers to save that URL inside of a launch.json, just so that you can access it easier in the future. So if I hit yes here, then you see that it creates this launch.json here. And then if I want to debug this again, I can just click this little play button, or use the launch.json, or use the launch configuration just through the command palette here. Yep. And so anyway, since this is the JavaScript debugger, so all the features that I just showed you, basically all the program features all work inside websites too. So if I set a breakpoint here, we can hit it, we can step through. And also the performance view also works for websites as well. So you can see CPU usage, memory usage. You can also see a few different things on websites. So you can click this little gear icon here, and then you can see the number of DOM nodes and the number of relayouts or recalcs that happen, which is really useful if you have more complex apps that have more complex layout. It's really useful to get a handle on what is actually taking resources in the browser and probably burning cycles of your layout engine or your style engine. Yeah, so that's about that. And now I'll turn it over to Brandon to show us how to actually use the Edge DevTools in VS Code during debug sessions. And so Brandon, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, thanks, Connor. So like they said before, my name's Brandon. I'm from the Edge DevTools team, and we've been working really hard with the VS Code team to integrate some of the features that you know and love from your browser DevTools directly into VS Code. So Connor has already shown what you can do with the built-in JavaScript debugger for setting breakpoints, working with the console, and even some performance characteristics. So we went and tackled some of the most popular tools that don't already integrate well with VS Code. So specifically DOM and CSS debugging and your network debugging. And so in order to demonstrate that, I'm working on the same simple project that Connor has here. And if I go ahead and add my launch Edge configuration, let's see if I just pick Edge launch. Really easy to configure your launch.json. So go ahead and save that. And then if I come over here, if I launch Edge, you'll see we have the app running up like we had before. And we have a new inspect integration icon, which will allow us to go ahead and if you don't have the extension installed, install the DevTools extension. And now we can see here, we got the latest extension. We can see the most recent contributions to it. But since I already have my debugging session open, I can go ahead and attach the extension to the current debug target. So we'll give this a minute while it loads. And as you can see here, we have a few of the tools integrated directly into VS Code. So you'll see a modified welcome tool, very similar to what you would see for the first time launching the DevTools in Edge browser, except it's tailored a bit to our extension. So we have links to our documentation, our GitHub page, where you can submit feedback and how to get a hold of us. And then on the right-hand side, some of the latest features that we brought into the extension, notably new CSS and Flexbox debugging, and a few bug fixes for switching between targets. So now that we're up and running, I can go ahead and dismiss the welcome tab. And we can see that we have our elements page. If I bring back up the browser and move this over here, let's see if I can get this all on the same screen. And we can see that we have already attached directly to our page. We have our elements debugging that we know and love. And so if I were to use this to debug an issue with my page, let's say that I'm building the UI, and over here I have a table that I want to show the previous submissions to our spell checker. So if I can go ahead and put test in here, But maybe I wanted this title to span across this entire table, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. So if I come over here to my Elements tool, I select the previous submission, you can see that we already start getting the highlighting, and it opens our DOM tree directly to that element. And down here, we have all of our styles, computed styles, event listeners, properties of the current element, and the accessibility if you're working on improving the accessibility of your page. And then over here, now that we've selected on this element directly, we can see the styles applied to it. What's great, instead of normally in the browser, you might make changes here to kind of mess around and see what opens up on the page. But here, we can link directly into your source code. So you can go ahead and edit CSS directly. So if I go ahead and click on this, it'll take me directly to the style from my local project where we made the change. What's nice about this is we get all of the nice autocomplete and MDN references that we had in VS Code automatically. So if I go back to my DevTools page, I can also see that this is inside of a grid. And if I turn this on, I get the nice grid highlighting. Now, sorry about the very, very small screen here, but if you try this out yourselves, you'll be able to see that these are highlighting both the grid outlines and the line numbers. So in combination with the CSS styles, I can see here that from my MDN reference, maybe I thought that the previous submission, in order to do grid column, I was supposed to say my start column to my end column. But from MDN, I can understand that this is actually supposed to be the start line to the end line, and it takes the line numbers. And so very quickly, I can see, oh, this needs to go from line 1 to 3 instead of 2. Make the change, save, reload the page, and there you go. And so this cuts out a lot of the work that you might be doing as a dev, making changes in your CSS in the DevTools in the browser. It brings them directly back into your code, and so that you can iterate faster. This works great if you have hot module reloading or any kind of like a gulp server running in the background too, because you'll see these changes automatically as you're saving and editing. One of the other nice things that I can do here is I can go to my network tab, see all the network requests that I'm making. So if I reload the page, I can see that I have, the style sheet that I loaded and then the index page. And then I can see the web worker in the background as well as I go ahead and submit. On the Word, we can see that the spell check request went through and it was successful. One of the things that we can go ahead and do here is simulate what would happen if my page was offline and I try to submit a request. So if I go in and submit this here, we could see immediately that we failed because we're not connected. And then our UI didn't probably update as the way we want. So now this gives me clues that I can go through as a dev and start updating my page to address what might happen if the user were offline. Maybe I need to think about adding a service worker or things like that. And so this allows us to very quickly bring in some of these tools right into your source code and provide a more seamless experience for authoring and editing. There's a few other things that I want to show. One of the nice things that we do here is we add a new Edge extension sidebar. It gives additional links to documentation, and you can even launch an instance of Edge directly from our extension. So this will bring up the new Edge, a new instance of Edge, and give you some a little bit of documentation on what you can use the extension for. Again, here you can use see links to our documentation page, links to our GitHub repository, and a few other instructions. One last thing I'll go ahead and show while we're here. So over here we have the new sidebar. I can go ahead and if I launch another instance of Edge, and so now I have multiple targets, I can go ahead and switch directly between those automatically by hitting the new attach button. The tools will reload. So say you have multiple targets that you're working on, or you want to be able to take the styles from one page and apply them to another, you can very quickly switch between your targets, get the information you need, and bring them right back to your source code. And the last thing I'll go ahead and show is that as you can see here, it can be a bit challenging to juggle all the instances of Edge and your VS Code extension. So if I go ahead and close this, I can open the extension settings, and then let's see, I can search for headless mode settings. So what this will allow us to do is launch an instance of Edge, but without a UI. So this is great for testing web pages, or if I just want to save on screen real estate, I can launch my project against Edge. And we can see here that we have a screencast view of Edge directly in the extension inside VS Code. All of the DOM highlighting works here immediately. And I didn't launch a separate instance down here. So you can take up less space and just be focusing right in VS Code, making your changes, refreshing the page, iterating, and kind of tightening all of that loop. Yeah, so those are just some of the few things that we brought to the extension so far, and we're looking forward to bringing even more things in the future. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to Burke.
Hey, all right. Thank you very much, Connor and Brandon. Chat, I think that's what we're supposed to call. Don't you call the chat the chat? Hey, chat. Hey, chat. If you have questions, now's your time to get them. I'm going to be a real streamer someday. So yeah, question. We got some questions. This is an interesting one. I had this thought too, Brandon. We'll start with you. Okay. The question is phrased like this: does it work with Angular? But if I could rephrase that question a little bit, it's, does it work with Vue, React, right? It looks like you're showing off kind of a simple Express app, but most web apps like have a process that runs somewhere else. There's like a Webpack thing happening. Like, how does this work with that? Does it work with JavaScript frameworks?
So I would say, yes, it works with JavaScript frameworks. If the question is, have we brought in the React and Angular DevTools extensions into VS Code? The answer is no, but there's no reason you couldn't go ahead and set up a launch.json to launch, to go ahead and configure your server, launch your React app or your Webpack or your Webpack-based app or your Vue or your Angular app. Now, with the more complicated apps, it can be a bit more challenging to make sure that we are targeting all of the right pages. So we have a few folks that use Angular and use our extension in combination with JS Debugger already. And we're constantly working on feedback. So please go ahead and try it out. And if there's something missing, let us know and we will go ahead and take a look.
Nice. Another question here from Gabriel. I hope I pronounced that correct. It's a username. It's either your name or it's a username. Either way, I did my best. Does it have a console? Can you get to the console? Like, can you console log? I assume is what they're asking, and see that.
Yeah, I can go ahead and tackle this one. So for the Edge extension, one of the nice reasons we haven't brought in the console directly here is because this is already available from JS Debugger. So if you are attached with JS Debug, as Connor mentioned, you can go ahead and this debug console is your full console that you would see in the browser. So this already has all the functionality that you would need. And so the goal is to be able to bring in things that would enhance this experience, but not duplicate information that you can already get from JavaScript debugging your page from VS Code.
So I actually did this not too long ago. Maybe it was earlier. Well, it was last week. I was working on something and I launched a sort of an Edge debug instance and I just pasted in my URL and then I just viewed the console inside of Visual Studio Code and that worked just fine. I was able to see the complete console from the browser. So 2 thumbs up from Burke here. Question on, I'm using Linux. Can I use Edge DevTools on Linux? I'm sorry, Connor, all these questions are for Brandon. I didn't make up the chat. You gotta send Connor some questions. Linux, Brandon?
Yes, I believe we have support for Linux. I think the latest version of Edge, I could be wrong on this one. I think we are currently still in beta for Edge on Linux. If that is not correct, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But we should have support for targeting that. If there are some issues on Linux, please let us know. But yes, we want to be able to support using Linux and targeting Edge and with your DevTools on Linux.
Personal question, Brandon.
Yeah.
Why have you not updated your VS Code?
Why have I not updated my VS Code? I literally thought I did that right.
Oh no, no, sorry, it's you're not logged into something. It's a different. I called you out for the wrong. It's a notification on your sign in.
Oh man, okay,
that's my fault.
All right.
Brandon, I have a question for you as we are rounding out here. We got a couple more minutes, but one of the things, excuse me, sorry, Connor, this question's for you. One of the things that I struggle with debugging apps is getting everything set up, right? Just getting the launch configs right, getting everything set up. But then after that, I struggle with reading those charts and reading the outputs. Do you have any resources that we could give people that struggle with that like I do, especially when the stack traces are just huge and it's like anonymous, 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 and it just becomes impossible to chase down what's actually happening?
Yes. So there's kind of quite a bit to unpack there. So yeah, first of all, like for the long call stacks, I mentioned like a few months ago the debugger kind of like learned to apply source maps to call stacks. So if you have like functions like they're named in the source, then it'll actually show you the correct source positions where those errors occurred. That said, like having those like anonymous functions like inside of call stacks is kind of just a JavaScript thing. And actually, that's why like some linting frameworks like recommend that either you have like link functions, or you assign your function, or if you have an error function, you assign it to a constant value. In that case, like the JavaScript engine like V8 will then like name that function so that it'll appear in your source map. But like ultimately, if you have like a bunch of like anonymous functions, there's like limited things that the debugger alone can actually do to solve that. Like we can show you like where in your code those happen, but we can't really like give them names when they don't have names. I'm not sure how well that answers your question, but
no, that's good, and I do like how the it looked like the debugger is removing some of that duplicity, or it's trying at least to collapse a lot of that stuff for you to get rid of the superfluous calls. So that's good. I think learning to debug is like a skill for developers in and of itself, right? Like it's not the same as writing the app, debugging. And I remember when people used to get on to developers about like, you need to get better at your performance. I'm like, you can't just perf analyze an application. Like not everybody knows how to do that. And by everybody, I mean me. We are a couple minutes over here, but real quick, when can I debug WebAssembly code in VS Code? From Theorem Geek would like to know.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So like WebAssembly code actually used to work a couple years ago because a V8 kind of like just shimmed in WebAssembly support to their existing APIs. Now they have new APIs which we haven't yet learned to support in the new debugger. I think it's definitely coming. Like WebAssembly is becoming more of a thing like every month. I think it's coming, but I don't think that's on the roadmap quite yet. But stay tuned for that and check our release notes.
All right, so WebAssembly debugging coming soon, maybe. Linux support coming soon, maybe. Question marks on all those. All right, well, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Connor. Thanks everybody out there for joining us today. Come back on Thursday. We're gonna do it again. I think like 10 a.m. Central Time, 8 a.m. Pacific, something like that. We'll stream again. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.